Question number 3, Todd Barclay.
E te mana whakawa tēnā koe.
Tēnā koe.
What reports has he received on the So this is a question to the Minister of Finance. What reports has he received on the outlook for the New Zealand economy?
The Honourable Bill English.
Mr Speaker, in a speech delivered yesterday, the Governor of the Reserve Bank said the economy is growing at around 2.5% a year, consistent with the solid, moderate growth that this government is looking for. He highlighted the factors supporting that growth, including our record high labour force participation rate, strong population growth as New Zealanders return from overseas, and skilled migrants are attracted to New Zealand, ongoing investment activity including in construction, and continued strength in the services sector, which makes up around 70% or 60 to 70% of GDP. He pointed out the economy is also being supported by an exchange rate which is 25% down against the US dollar compared to this time last year, and of course lower interest rates.
Supplementary question, Todd Barclay.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. How is the fall in the exchange rate and interest rate supporting sustained growth in the New Zealand economy?
The Honourable Bill English.
Well, Mr Speaker, these are adjustments that one would expect, particularly given the way the commodity cycle has worked for the dairy industry. Industries that were forced to become more efficient when the exchange rate was 88 cents US are now likely to become more profitable with the exchange rate at 67 cents against the US dollar. And of course these businesses may get the benefits in time of lower interest rates. These changes will, for instance, benefit the technology sector. A report released today stated that technology exports have doubled over the past 6 years and are now worth more than $6 billion, making it New Zealand's third largest export earner behind dairy and tourism. We, of course, welcome these positive comments from the Labor Party about the diversification that seems to have been going on under their very nose in the economy, and we're pleased they understand the importance of the technology industry.
Supplementary question, Todd Barclay.
How is the government supporting export sectors such as ICT?
The Honourable Bill English.
Well, Mr Speaker, it's among the 350 pieces of concrete microeconomic policy laid out in the government's business growth agenda. A key part of supporting exporters, including ICT, is the significant efforts to secure free trade agreements. The government is also rolling out ultra-fast broadband, building the Rural Broadband Initiative and establishing 3 ICT graduate schools in Auckland, Wellington and Christchurch. So the government's unfolding vision of a growing, robust ICT sector seems to be going pretty well.
Supplementary question. Order. Order. Supplementary question, David Seymour.
What up? Does the government have any plans to lower barriers to foreign direct investment?
The Honourable Bill English.
Well, Mr Speaker, New Zealand is in general open to foreign direct investment, but of course in some areas there are quite significant barriers. The Overseas Investment Act applies a set of very complex tests to people who want to buy certain categories of land in New Zealand. The government has no plans to change that piece of legislation.
Supplementary question, Todd Barclay.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. How does economic growth translate into more jobs and higher incomes for New Zealand families?
The Honourable Bill English.
Well, Mr Speaker, the economic growth, of course, is about companies investing another dollar and employing another person. And the effect of that is that since late 2010, New Zealanders have created 194,000 extra jobs, and the latest forecasts anticipate around 150,000 more jobs by 2019. Average annual wages have increased by $5,700 in the last 4 years, and are forecast to rise to around $63,000 a year in 4 years' time. That is an increase of a further $7,000. So despite some concerns at the moment about the dairy prices, the outlook for the economy, for jobs and incomes is for moderate sustainable growth.
Supplementary question, Grant Robertson.
Has he seen any reports of anyone other than him saying that the economic slowdown is coming at, quote, the right time in the electoral cycle? And when will he apologise for that cynical and out-of-touch comment?
The Honourable Bill English. Well, it was actually two questions.
Mr. Speaker, I have seen reports of that member saying it, but of course the relationship between the economic cycle and the political cycle is important, because Labor decided to think about thinking about work, and then they went and thought about work, and the result of their thought about work was that they've now decided to think about it further. The next election's coming far too quickly for Labor to work out what work is.
Supplementary question, Grant Robertson.
Which of the following reports has given him such a rosy outlook on the economy? GDP growth being negative in the March quarter, the worst quarter since December 2010. Dairy prices having fallen by over 50% since March. Commodity prices being down 20% in the year to June. Economic pessimism outweighing optimism for the first time in 6 years. Economic pessimism at its highest since the Canterbury earthquakes. Business confidence negative for the first time since the Canterbury earthquakes. Business confidence at a 3-year low.
We now need the question. The Honourable Bill English.
Well, Mr. Speaker, on any given day, there's things about an economy or a world economy that aren't going well, and there's things that are going well. And we're fortunate that because we have a resilient economy, enough of the New Zealand economy is going pretty well, particularly the manufacturing sector, since Labor said it was in crisis, that, as the Reserve Bank Governor said yesterday, we're currently growing about 2.5%, and that is consistent with an outlook for sustainable, moderate growth.
Question number 4.